All right, let's get started. Let me see if I can turn the music off first. All right, so scenes from the Battle of Algiers, scene 17. Terence Kader's house, outside night. It is a starry night, and there are few lights visible in the windows of the Kasbah. In the background, there is a triumph neon of the European city, the sea, the ships at anchor, and the shining beams of a lighthouse. Kader turns around gracefully and goes to sit on the wall of the Terence. Kader, Kader, you could have been a spy. We had to put you to the test. Ali looks at him silently. Ali, with an unloaded pistol? Kader, I'll explain. Kader is a few years older than Ali, but not so tall. He is slender, with a slight yet sturdy bone structure. The shape of his face is triangular, aristocratic, his lips thin, his eyes burning with hatred, but at the same time, cunning. He continues to speak in a calm tone, which has a ironic touch to it. So this is the scene, because what happened was Ali was given an unloaded pistol to go and to only talk to somebody, but he ended up pulling the trigger. So he ended up doing like not what is according to what they wanted to. So he's now being criticized maybe. Kader, let's suppose you were a spy in prison. When the FLN contacts you, you pretend to support the revolution. And when the French help you to escape, Ali, sure, by shooting at me? Kader, even that could be a trick. You escape then show up at the address with which the brothers in prison gave to you, and so you are able to contact me. Ali, I don't even know your name yet. Start drinking water. Kader, my name is Kader. Ali Sair Kader. In other words, in order to join the organization, you had to undergo a test. I could have told you to murder the barman, but he's an Algerian, and the police would let you kill him, even though he is one of theirs. By obeying such an order, you still could have been a double agent. And that's why I told you to unalive the French policeman, because the French wouldn't have let you do it. If you were with the police, you wouldn't have done it. Ali was followed Kader's logic a bit laboriously, and he is fascinated by it. But not everything is clear yet, Ali. But I haven't shot him. Kader, smiling. You weren't able to, but what's important is that you tried, Ali. What's important for me is that you let me risk my life for nothing. Kader, come on, you're exaggerating. The orders were to shoot him in the back. Ali, I don't do that kind of thing. Kader, then don't complain. Ali, you still haven't told me why you didn't let me kill him. Kader, because we weren't ready for the French. Before attacking, we must have safe places from which to depart and find refuge. Of course, there is a Kasbah, but even the Kasbah isn't safe yet. There are too many drunks, pushers, whores, addicts, spies, people who talk too much, people who are ready to sell themselves, undecided people. We must either convince them to eliminate them. We must think of ourselves first. We must clean out the Kasbah first, the Kasbah. Only then will we be able to deal with the French. Do you understand, Ali? Ali doesn't answer. Kader has come down from the wall and looks towards the Kasbah. Ali looks towards the Kasbah, immersed in the night. Ali, and And how many are we? Keter. Not enough. Scene 18. The area of the Kasban underworld. Inside/outside day. March 1965. A warm spring wind. Large white clouds at the western edge of the Kasban. From the upper and lower Kasban, the street of the Algerian underworld descends to the brothel quarters. Speaker. National liberation from the bulletin number 24. Brothers of the Kasban, the colonial administration is responsible not only for our people's great misery, but also for the degrading vices of many of our brothers who have forgotten their own dignity. Shady bars and gamblers and opium smokers, shops filled with tourists, trinkets, merchants, fences, pimps, children with adult faces, ghastly old women, and young girls, whores standing in the doorway of their houses, the girls having their faces uncovered, having put scarves on their heads, nodded at the nape. Speaker. Corruption and brutality have always been the most dangerous weapon of colonialism. The National Liberation Front calls all people to struggle for their own physical and moral redemption, indispensable conditions for the conquest of independence. Therefore, beginning today, the clandestine authority of the FLN prohibits the following activities: gambling, the scale of usage of all types of drugs, the scale of usage of alcoholic beverages, prostitution, and its solicitation. Transgressors will be punished. Habitual transgressors will be punished by death. Ooh, that's kind of, ooh. Scene 24. Brothel inside day. Ali has entered the brothel. It is morning, and there are few clients. The whores of Algeria and European. Some of them are pretty. The madam of an Algerian dressed in European clothes. She is about 40, heavily made up. When she spots Ali, she interrupts her usual professional chant. She seems curious, yet glad. Madam, shouts Ali, La Ponty. She stops herself, already sorry for having spoken so quickly and unprudently. Ali doesn't answer her, but approaches with a steady and serious glance. Madam, changing tones. I haven't seen you around for some time. I thought you were still in prison. Ali leans against the counter, never once taking his eye off her. Ali, has Hassan La Banosi here? Madam, no, he left earlier this morning. You know how it is with the boss, Ali. I want to see him. If he shows up, tell him that I'm around. Ali moves away from the counter and turns. He leaves without a word. The woman tries to understand what has happened and follows him with a worried glance. Scene 25. Small street. Hassan. Inside, day. Hassan, Ali, my son. Where have you been hiding? Ali turns suddenly, then pulls back so that his back is against the wall of the alley. Ali, in a sharp voice, don't move. Then he glances at the others. Ali hands still. The others are three young Algerians, Hassan's bodyguards. Hassan's La Benoise is tall, with short legs out of proportion with his enormous chest. He is somewhat corpulent. He has a wide face and cheerful and self-confident expression. His clothing is a strange combination of Algerian and European, which does not, however, appear ridiculous, but imposing. At Ali's remark, his expression changes, becomes amazed and baffled, but at the same time, his eyes give away the brain's attempt to find an explanation and a solution. Hassan, astonished. You know, I've never carried weapons. Ali keeps his arms and hands hidden under his Delgiba. Ali, I know. Hassan laughs warmly. and stretches out his hands, which are enormous, thick and rough. Hassian, you afraid of these? Ali, don't move. And Hassian, why are you afraid? We've always been friends. One might even say I brought you up. Isn't it true, Ali? Ali, it's true. Hassian, what's happening to you? Ali, the FLN has commanded you to death. Hassian is stunned. He speaks aloud, his thoughts in a soft voice. Hassian, so it comes to this. Then he bursts into a loud laugh and seems to turn to the 3 guards at his back. Hassian, I'm dying of laughter. Ha ha ha. Ali doesn't speak. He continues to stare at Hassian. Hassian suddenly stops laughing. His tone of voice changes, becomes berqui, and hurried. Hassian, how much are they paying you? Ali, they're not paying me anything. I've already warned you twice. This is the last warning. Decide. Hassian, what? What must I decide? Ali, you've got to change occupations, Hassian, right away. Hassian makes a gesture as if to emphasize what he is going to say. Hassian, with irony, okay, you convinced me. Then suddenly, unexpectedly, he lets out a shrill scream, like fencers who, before plunging their sword, try to frighten their adversaries. Simultaneously, he hurls himself forward, head lowered and arms outstretched. Ali steps aside and releases a blast of machine gun fire. Hassian falls flat on his face. There is movement. Some passerbys approach the 3 boys trying to escape. Ali shouting, "Stop!" The barrel of the machine gun is visible through the opening of his dalgiliba. Ali's voice is quivering angrily. Ali, look at him well. Now nobody can do whatever he wants in the Kasbah. Not even Hassian. Least of all, you 3 pieces of shit. Go away now. Go away and spread the word. Go on. Raiding, and that's the end of that scene. Raids on Chicago's public housing. So back to contemporary. Oh, well, it's not back to contemporary. That was contemporary. I think that comes from Dying Colonialism. I'm not too sure. But it's Algiers. I think they mention in Dying Colonialism. I'm not sure. We're going to read that too. Following the fact sheet is taken from the leaflet distributed in Chicago's neighborhoods in December 1988. The commentary following the fact sheet was written by staff. The most recent raid upon the Chicago housing projects took place on February 3rd, 1989 in Rockwell Gardens. Editor notes, these words were written in 1989. Fact sheet. Raids on Chi-Town, like Chicago, Chi Public Housing by Chicago Housing Authorities, Chicago Police Department. Since September 20th, the Chicago Housing Authority, in conjunction with the Chicago Police Department, has conducted raids on 4 buildings and 3 public housing projects. The alleged purpose of these raids is to uproot gangs and drugs from public housing. But this fact sheet will demonstrate that this crackdown has meant a massive violation of the rights of people in public housing. Chi head Vincent Lane has promised to raid up to 100 other buildings in public housing. Weird. Who's in the comments? It's Fatima. It's up to everybody else to bring up Fatima. Chronology of the raid. Rockwell Gardens, 2417 West Adams, September 20th, 1988. 2 Chi managers, backed up by 60 police, staged an assault that needed 1 arrest for possession of weapons. About 100 of the 138 units in the building were occupied. A mass wedding of women whose lives and friends were not on the lease occurred after the raid. The other donors paid for limousines, tuxedos, brides, dresses, flowers, gifts, and in 1988, 19 persons arrested, 13 on criminal charges of trespassing because they couldn't show identification proving that they lived in the apartments. 6 charged with guns and drugs violations, 14 children picked up for truancy. In the Cabrini Greens, 1015 to 1017 North Larrabee, a 10-story building with 140 units, 41% vacant, raided on December 6th. Massive show of force is assembled of 150 shy personnel and cops. All 7 arrests are for criminal trespassing. Cabrini Greens, 500 West Oak Street, December 8th. Of the 200 or so, 75 cops raid the building. 7 people are arrested, including shy janitor charged modus operandi. What does operandi mean? Let's find out. A method of operating or a way of working. When I say shy, it's Chicago. Shy in Chicago, police surrounded and sealed off the building, generally between 9 to 10 a.m. Armed cops, sometimes with dogs, are posted on all floors to prevent anyone from escaping from the building. A door-to-door warrantless search of all apartment follows. The nature of the search varies from a walk-through to a rifling through cabinets and drawers and closets. For apartments where people are sleeping, don't answer the door or are not home. Pass keys are used to gain access. Some residents report a forced entry need further confirmation. Anyone who cannot show proper identification is prove they are on the lease is forced to leave, including boyfriends, relatives, and friends. Starting with the raid on Prairie Courts, charges of criminal trespass were brought against these people. Residents are taken to a makeshift headquarters where they are photographed and issued ID cards. Every child 7 years of age and older must carry ID to gain entry to the building. At Rockwell Gardens, all residents are also subjected without explanation to a retina scan, which records the blood vessels of the eye. In the eye, this high-tech form of identification is said to be more accurate than fingerprints. Entrances to all locked down buildings have been secured with steel gates where armed security guards control access. A 9 p.m. curfew was initially imposed in Rockwell. After an outcry, it was changed to midnight to 9 a.m. Midnight curfew have been imposed at all locked down buildings. No visitors, friends, relatives, or boyfriends can stay past midnight, and no residents will be admitted to their own apartment after midnight. All visitors must sign in and out and show ID at the security desk. Tenants must come downstairs to the security desk to admit their visitors. At Rockwell, one man told the Chicago Tribune that the security guard came to eject him from his girlfriend's apartment when he had not left the building by midnight. A 72-hour 3-day ban on all visitors who impose Prairie Courts and Cabrini Green buildings. Vincent Lane was said that background checks will be conducted on all tenants in the lockdown buildings. Anyone who has a criminal record or complaints of anti-social behavior on file with the Chai may be evicted. Lane has promised to institute surprise housekeeping inspections. Anyone who does not meet the CHS standards can be evicted. There are many things that we can say about the CHA raids. However, we are conscious new Africans, and despite being behind the walls of prisons, we continue an active involvement in the struggle to liberate the nation and to build a socialist society. Therefore, no matter what we say about the raids, we always return to the basic question concerning our movement, need, and ability to become the legitimate representative and African people who consciously or not require realization to these same goals. Obviously, the Chicago Housing Authority is not a legitimate representative of the Africans living in the raided buildings. One question then for us concerns and means that our movement must use in order to truly serve the interests of Africans throughout Chicago and elsewhere. One of the means that we use involves our manner to study and preparation, and another involves the way we carry on dialogue with other prisoners who may return to the communities outside the walls and become consciously active. When we study, we learn facts and we ask questions about those facts. For example, if it was the fact that the Algerian FLN issued a communique such as that on page 31 of the issue, how did it acquire its image of legitimacy among the Algerian masses? To find only part of the answer, we'd have to look beyond FLN itself. We'd have to learn something about the prior years of practice, the years of educating and serving the people on the part of those organizations that formed the FLN. Before there was an FLN, for the people to know, they knew only those organizations that had served the separate and varied interests of particular classes, groups, and stratas of people. The FLN represented a unity that had not previously existed, a unity not merely of the presented organizations, but through those organizations, a unity of the Algerian people that had not previously existed. But before such unity comes much work. Our own movement needs ever greater unity. It will be the result of the work we put into creating it, and the creativity must manifest itself above all in the cadres who work among for the people in the Kasbah. It's CASBAH, everybody. I just cannot pronounce it. Yeah. Recounting Chicago housing. Okay, cool. We also impress upon ourselves that being a cadre on a freedom fighter involves much more than being able to pull off expropriation or to challenge the colonialist state. First line of defense. For our part, one of the things we say is, if the name NAIM is really on its job, most or all potential cadres will not be given the chance to perform armed action until they've proven themselves on the toughest battlefield there is, the mass front. Because any kind of movement needs a mass base, everybody. Remember that. Need a mass base, cadres, and then you need a People's Defense Force and a people's government. Bloodshed shouldn't be allowed to pick up the gun until we've proven how well they can organize and serve that will. Say, pick up the elderly from their homes, take them to cash their checks, to see the doctor, or to attend a meeting on some issues facing them and the rest of the community. We won't be trusted with the task of gathering or using intelligence for the movement until we win the trust of the people in the neighborhood. Performing such services and winning the trust of the people in such ways are necessary if the NAIM is to come to be the authority upon which the masses seek out to help solve daily problems. It makes little sense to shout, "Free the land," if we can't free a few square blocks or square miles in cities, towns, or countries or counties where new Africans and other oppressed people are the majority of the population. To describe a revolution, one doesn't have to describe armed action. There are inevitable, but what defines and decides any revolution is the social struggles of the mass support by armed action. Frantz Fanon, Dying Colonialism. I love that. That's one of my favorites from Frantz Fanon is Dying Colonialism. People need to pick up Dying Colonialism. It's fucking good. From the generation to the next, from one generation to the next. Ours is a struggle with continuity, unbroken except occasionally in our own minds. We have and must continue to struggle from one generation to the next, evolving in time and space, a people in motion, regaining independence and remaking history. Ours is a mass struggle, a people struggle, a struggle involving the participation of the young and the old, the female and the male. Ours is the struggle of an entire people, a whole nation oppressed and moving towards a new way of life on the planet made by greed and fear. Our struggle involves our elders, the refugees who were forced to abandon the national territories, head north and northwest during the migration. They are refugees, those who migrated from the national territories during World War I and World War II years. Our elders were refugees during the years of the Black Codes, when they fled the national territories. The cities of America are full with new African refugees who entered them during the 30s, the 40s, escaping the Klan and the Southern prisons. One step ahead of the hounds, a few minutes ahead of the lynch mob, is how many new Africans came north, refugees from the national territory. New Africans now living in Peoria, Brooklyn, Oakland, and Des Moines were born in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and Greensboro, North Carolina. 12-year-old bloods boarded trains in New Orleans, Mobile, and Atlanta. That's Mobile, I don't know, can't say it. Loaded with strained brown paper bags, a cold chicken, cardboard suitcases, and dreams of big cities where work was available and where white folks weren't so mean. New African women who cooked in big pots for white folks in Charleston came to New York and Chicago only to cook in greasy spoons or in a quiet kitchen of more white folks for the same few dollars a week and all the leftovers they could carry. What of our past? What of our history? What of our future? I can imagine the pain and the strength of my great-great-grandmother who were slaves and my great-great-grandmother who were Cherokee indigenous trapped in on reservations. I remember my great-grandmother who walked everywhere rather than sit in the back of the bus. I think about North Carolina in my hometown, and I remember the women of my grandmother's generation, strong, fierce women who could stop you with a look out of the corner of their eyes, women who walked with majesty, who could wring a chicken's neck and scale a fish, who can pick cotton plants and garden and sew without a pattern, women who boiled clothes white in big black cauldrons, who hummed work songs and lullabies, women who visited the elderly, mailed soup for the sick and shortened bread for the babies. shortened bread for the babies. Women who delivered babies searched for healing roots and brewed medicines. Women who darned SOX and chopped wood and laid bricks. Women who could swim rivers and shoot the head off a snake. Women who take passionate responsibility for their children and for their neighbors' children too. The women in my grandmother's generation made giving an art form. Here, gal, take this pot of collards to Sister Sue. Take this bag of pecans to school for the teacher. Stay here while I go tend Mr. Johnson's leg. Every child in the neighborhood ate in their kitchen and called each other sisters because of feeling rather than as a result of a movement. They supported each other, through the lean times, sharing the little they had. The women of my grandmother's generation in my hometown trained their daughters for womanhood. They taught them to give respect and to demand respect. They taught their daughters how to churn butter, how to use elbow grease. They taught their daughters to respect the strength of their bodies and to lift boulders and how to kill a hog. What do you do for colic? How to break a fever and how to make a poultice patchwork quilt, plait hair, and how to hum and sing. They taught their daughters to take care, to take charge, and to take responsibility. They would not tolerate a quote lazy heifer, and or a gal with her head in the clouds. Their daughters had to learn how to get their lessons, how to survive, how to be strong. The women of my grandmother's generation were the glue that held families and community together. They were the backbone of the church and of the school. They regarded outside institutions with dislike and distrust. They were determined that their children should serve, and they were committed to a better future. From quote, Woman in Prison, How We Are, by Comrade Sister Sada Shakur, printed in Black Scholars, April 1978. We became refuge from the national territory. We came with dreams, and we wanted to, quote, forget the past, to forget the oppression and terror, to forget the snarl of rednecks and the strange fruit of popular trees. Far too many of us forgot that the struggle goes on from one generation to the next. We forgot that we were simply refugees and not yet free. In the 40s, 50s, and even the 60s were years which saw new Africans' faces rubbed with royal crowns so they couldn't be ashy, saw our heads plastered with Murray's noses and lips as repulsive objects in the thin-shaped beauty standards of America. These same years saw us more gradually farther from our first stop. Upon leaving the trains and buses, they saw the families that came north, moving farther out south, into dwellings just abandoned by whites. They saw us move further from each other, and the strength which allowed us to survive and maintain the consciousness of ourselves as one people, struggling for one generation to the next until we are free. Being colonial subjects situated so near the seat of empire has blurred our vision. Slaves in the richest country of the world, while still slaves are better off than slaves elsewhere. America is the, quote, big house of the plantations it has made of a good part of the world. It is more difficult now than in the past for us to feel acutely the chains that bind us, enough so that we begin again to pass on the history, to begin again to socialize the children and hand down the awareness that comes with being taught the survival / resistant techniques needed to overcome the obstacles of our independence presented by the settlers who rule. From one generation to the next is how we must move until the nation is sovereign. Build to win, free the land. February 14th, ADM. All right. Let's move on to Malcolm X's model of personal transformation. You're still looking for the book, for that book for the library? I thought it's underneath Frantz Fanon. It should be in the section of Frantz Fanon. Hey, Rachel, that's where it should be. Anybody have any questions before I move on? Any questions yet? Comrade Sisters? Oh, okay. I have no idea. Anybody have any questions before I move on? Nope, not yet. All right, good. All right, Malcolm X, model of personal transformation. Malcolm X often used the concept of prison as a metaphor to describe the situation of new African people. He applied that just as those in actual prisons are expected to, quote, rehabilitate themselves as a condition for their release, we must transform ourselves as a people as a condition for securing our freedom from oppression. Malcolm's autobiography offers evidence of the pivotal role that prison played in its transformation, especially chapters 10, 11, and 12, that provide guidance for imprisoned new Africans who can begin a process of self-transformation, similar to the undertaking by Malcolm. We have the added benefits of knowing, oh, there's my first one. First restriction, everybody. TikTok should allow content like mine. You allow content like mine all the time, you fucking app. Fatima, it's up to you. It's up to everybody else. Fatima can join. We have the added benefits of knowing the general outline of our identity, purpose, and direction. Although, in prison, we are not defined by this condition. We are new Africans, identity, nationality, citizens of an oppressed nation. Our purpose is to secure the independence of the nation and socialist development in the direction. The time spent in prison should be devoted to our self-transformation, to the further development of our identity, commitment to our purpose, and pursuit of knowledge and skills needed to aid our people in the realization of the socialist development of our society. Section 2 of the same chapter. While in prison, Malcolm began to think in a systematic, critical way about his past, lifestyles, about the world and the society he lived in. He began to question the way things were. He realized that change in his life and in the society was both possible and necessary. While in prison, Malcolm began to think, but not only after he began to read. Prior to his imprisonment, Malcolm had been enclosed in the world of the hustler, the player, the pimp, the gangster, the parasite, and he couldn't imagine himself outside of that world. Reading exposed Malcolm to new worlds. It allowed him to see that there are alternatives to the lifestyle and values of the social parasite. While in prison, Malcolm began to think and to read, but only after he had been encouraged to do so by someone that he respected and that who had taken an unselfish interest in him. Malcolm was later motivated by the new sense of self-worth and identity and purpose. His family introduced him to the religious and political philosophy of Islam, as taught by Elijah Muhammad and practiced by the Nation of Islam. Soon after leaving prison, Malcolm began to effect change upon the world, but he was able to do so because he had first changed himself while in prison. Many prisoned new Africans can follow his example, change themselves, become new men and women, committed to acting upon the world to affect it radical transformation. As with Malcolm, such change would more likely occur if imprisoned New Africans were encouraged and assisted to be individuals, groups, or communities seeking to make them part of a collective process of redemption and progressive social development. Section 3. When in prison, New Africans read Malcolm's autobiography. We should reflect upon our own lives, as we can easily identify with Malcolm and see similarities between his life and our own. In fact, Malcolm charges us to examine our lives when he sees, quote, "Why am I as I am?" To understand that of any person, his whole life from birth must be reviewed. All of our experiences fuse into our personality. Everything that ever happened to us is an ingredient. That's an awesome thing. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Critical review of one's own life is the first step of the process of personal transformation. It's also the hardest step to take because it requires that one be brutally honest and unreserved in the examination and critique of one's fears and shortcomings. Reading Malcolm can help us to understand how critical self-examination is done. What is there in Malcolm's life that is not in our own? Who was he, if not one of us? What does Malcolm mean to us, if not that we, like him, can change? What does his What does his prison experience mean to us, if not that? We too can use the prison as the environment within which we undergo our own metamorphosis. As Malcolm looked back on his life as a parasite, he acknowledged the degrees to which it was a result of the bad choices he had made, due in part to, quote, the wrong kinds of heroes, the wrong kinds of influences. But those heroes and influences, those bad choices, should be examined within the context of the society that helped to produce them. We are all products of a unique form of colonial oppression. Section 4. Most people enter prison thinking only of surviving the experience and returning to their previous way of life. They spend most of their time watching television, listening to music, playing sports, or working jobs linked to the operations of the prison, i.e. kitchen or laundry, janitorial services. Educational programs in prisons are designed so that only a few prisoners may participate. Rare are the self-motivated prisoners who decide to educate and transform themselves. A prisoner has time that he can put to good use. I'd put prisons second to college at the best place for a man to go if he needs to do some thinking. If he's motivated in prison, he can change his life. I don't think anybody ever got more out of going to prison than I did. In fact, prison enabled me to study far more intensely than I would have in my life had gone differently and had attended some college. Where else but in prison could I have attacked my ignorance? By being able to study intensely, sometimes as much as 15 hours a day. Jesus. When convicted in 1946, Malcolm was first sent to the prison in Charlestown, Massachusetts, where he initially wasted his time engaging in aimless rebellion and drug use. He didn't begin to put time to good use until he was encouraged to do so by Bambi, and older Khan, who spent many years in many prisons. But he had not wasted his time. Bambi was articulate and well-read, and he became a minister of Malcolm, who'd been drawn by Bambi because he was the first man I ever seen command total respect with his words. Bambi reignited within Malcolm the passion for words and the acquisition of knowledge that he'd begun to lose in the 8th grade. He urged Malcolm to take advantage of the prison library and to enroll in some of the corresponding courses allowed by the prison. Malcolm admitted that at that point in his life, his working vocabulary may have been only 200 words, which, together with his penmanship, made it impossible for him to write a decent letter. He first took a correspondence course in English. He began to read from the prison library, seeing letters that, quote, that I have often rejected upon the new vista that reading opened to me. I knew right there in prison that reading had changed forever the course of my life. As I see it today, the ability to read awoke inside me some long dormant craving to be mentally alive. Ooh, that's kind of like how I feel. I can relate. However, it would take more time and a different motivation for Malcolm to develop an appreciation for reading just described. Initially, his reading was aimless, and he was motivated by little more than the desire to become more literate hustler. He hadn't transformed that criminal colonial mentality. It wasn't until Malcolm was transferred to another prison that he moved beyond his mere book reading motion. Kind of like me, I'm trying to study more. Pretty soon I would have quite even these motions unless I had received the motivation that I did. That's Malcolm saying these. Section 5. Malcolm X was transferred to the Norfolk Prison Colony in Concord, Massachusetts in 1948. There he received a letter from his brother, Filbert, who said that he had joined the quote, Nation of Islam, and he urged Malcolm to pray for deliverance. Malcolm wasn't ready to hear anything about religion. His attitude changed, however, after he received the letter from another of his brothers, Reginald, because Reginald knew how Malcolm's street hustler mind worked. His approach was more effective than Filbert's. Reginald told Malcolm to stop eating pork, to stop smoking cigarettes, and that he would show Malcolm how to get out of prison. Malcolm took the bait. What he initially regarded as probably a con to be worked on the prison authorities turned out to be the next step in the process of his transformation. For the next year, I was the nearest thing to a hermit in the Norfolk Prison Colony. I never had been more busy in my life. I still marveled at how swiftly my previous life thinking pattern slid away from me. It is as though something else I knew of had lived, but hustled the crime. I would be startled to catch myself thinking in a remote way of my earlier self as another person. It was, I keep burping for some reason. It was at this point of his life that Malcolm began to read selectively and critically, and to develop intellectual discipline to complement his spiritual and moral development. For new African women and men held in U.S. prisons, Malcolm stand as an example of the way in which we can free ourselves. Even though behind prison walls, Malcolm attained his freedom long before he was released from prison. When he began to read, to think, to question his old habits and values. If Malcolm had not used his time in prison to change his life, he would not have left us ideas and a life worthy of examination and humiliation. Moreover, if Malcolm had not changed his life while in prison, he would have returned to the life of the criminal and the oppressed colonial subject. The parable of Job, which Elijah Muhammad used in introducing Malcolm to the Nation of Islam. Soon after Malcolm's release from prison, it is instructive. Mr. Muhammad told the gathering that Malcolm had been strong while in prison. Malcolm reports that he he had then said, when God had bragged about how faithful Job was, the devil said only God's hedge around Job kept Job so faithful. Remove that protective hedge. And the devil told God, and I will make Job curse you to your face. The devil could claim that hedge in prison. I had just used Islam. Mr. Muhammad said, but the devil would say that now, out of prison, I would return to my drinking, smoking, dope, and life of crime. We can go through the motions of changing our lives while in prison or otherwise, but the test of the truth comes when the prison doors are open, or when otherwise we're confronted with situations which test our character. Nevertheless, before we can remain faithful, we must first become faithful. Malcolm's prison transformation can be a model of our own. All right. Part 1, Reflections. We're going on the reflections of Victor Serge's What Everyone Should Know About State Repression. Notes. Editor notes. In the 1960s, as repression tightened, revolutionary groups needed an understanding of how to shield themselves from the FBI and police. But there have been no traditions of such security knowledge, either in the civil rights movement or youth gangs. At that time, the new life started, passing around the translation of Victor Serge's little pamphlet, What Everyone Should Know About State Repression. Serge had been a Russian revolutionary journalist, organizer, who had worked underground against the Tsar, secret police, and had a lot of first-hand experience. Yaki encouraged comrades to check Serge's booklet out, but since the Russians had lived back a century ago, in a time when you could do things like jumping on the streetcars to evade surveillance. Yaki wanted to update and reinforce the basic lesson. To an activity revolutionary, this understanding is like having a first aid kit or emergency equipment. If you are reading this kind of literature, you need to prepare to fight the political police. Part 1, Reflection. 1. Victor Serge. Victor Serge quickly corrects the common misconception about repression. Most of us hold an image of imperialist repression formed by its spectacular, brutal, and murderous results, i.e., the pre-dawn raid by police, the invasion by military forces, or the bombing and lynching by the state's paramilitary Triple K type garrison troops. In other words, we view a part of the repressive process as if it were the whole, because this part is the most visible and impacting aspect, and the aspect most portrayed by the imperialist media, as well as the media of the colonized nation. But Sergei points out that at the center of what everyone should know about the repression of the bourgeois imperialist state, what allows us to put the whole process into perspective is the immediate aim of all repressive forces. That immediate aim is quote, more to know than to repress. To know in order to repress at that appointed hour, to the extent desire, if not altogether. They can't repress what they don't know about. Therefore, the most immediate aim of revolutionary cadres and the revolutionary masses is, in this context, to allow the opposition to know as little as possible about anything and anyone. They should understand that each time we perform the common act of opening our mouths and speaking, we're telling someone something about ourselves, which was the potential of becoming a weapon used against us by the state. Should that information fall or be placed in their hands, the way we think, what we think about our habits, likes and dislikes, what we've done, what we are, what we may do, and how we may do it, etc. And the body has a language of its own too. That is, our moments, our movements can tell the opposition things about us that they want to know. In order to be able to repress us, thus, if they can't watch our movements, they'll be denied information that could be used to repress us and or our people. The enemy's attention to such thing is part of their science of repression. Paying due attention to such things should be a part of the science of revolutionary cadres and of the science of the revolutionary masses. We must share revolutionary science even as we discipline ourselves and stand vigilant over all our words and actions. 2. While building the cadres, the mass bases that must share revolutionary science and realize in a partial struggle, we must see that if the foundations that we build upon are shanky, then everything that comes to rest upon it will be shanky too. If we allow cracks to develop in the very foundation of the new movement, in the consciousness and practice of cadres and masses, then corrosion will be the characteristic element and of the structures, and our consciousness will be flawed. A major cause of cracks in foundations and undeveloped consciousness, incorrect political lines, and unacknowledged or unrecognized liberalism and opportunism. These relate to the more apparent secondary causes, i.e. the mistakes, complacency, and general failures to discipline or our words and actions. And I got another restriction. Don't know why. Yeah, it's too strict. It's ridiculous. The disciplines begin with experience, experiment, and the summation of these, which together form the core of the development of revolutionary science. In the words of one comrade, to heighten discipline means first and foremost that we heighten our grasp and practice of the ideology, line, and strategies of the organization. Interesting. It's good. And of the movement. To be under the discipline of, or subject to, the discipline of any organization, but of an army in particular, means that our comrades must heighten their efforts to understand our ideology, our political military line, and our strategy. It means that we must accept these as our own, that we are, therefore, able to put them into practice, be responsible for them, and able to fight for them and defend them. Similar be against the wind. Notes from the New African POW Journal, Book 6, 1980, page 7. 3. Hey, welcome back, everybody. 3. The task ahead and the conditions under which they must be performed demand that we not take anything for granted, least for all our survival. They know we're coming. In fact, they know far too much about those of us already here. And unless we grasp this fact, it, in all its implications, will consummate everything we touch and expose everything we are trying to build. We have to search for and then apply the consciousness, the skills and methods that will illuminate, or at least minimize the disadvantages occurring, especially over the past 10 years, which have resulted in the further disruption of the revolutionary forces. 4. Sergei also helps to place the image of the professional revolutionary into focus. It could be said that his entire book is about the most essential of those special qualities, the that enable the professional revolutionaries, i.e. cadres, to carry on, quote, the struggle against the political police. The imperialist state, first line of armed defense. This insight into the substantive composition of the professional revolutionary cadres help us keep in mind that the political police and other armed intelligence forces of the state are specialized defense/offensive branches of the oppressive state, and to struggle against them is merely to engage in primary instruments of physical coercion and repression that the state has at its command. In other words, we must keep in mind that the primary struggle is against the state as a whole. In this way, we can avoid being diverted by the struggles against its parts. The enemy is the U.S. imperialist state, not merely the FBI or the street cops that commit the most recent acts of colonial terror. Therefore, when we seek to raise consciousness about repression, we want to focus on the repression of the imperialist state, not merely the repression of the FBI or the local police department, because all those are utilized for the imperialist state to function and to maintain. Those are just parts. Those are parts of the machine. The machine is the colonial state, because this machine rises out of these things, these forces, these reactionary forces towards the people to protect capital and the colonial state. B, the imperialist state also has another instrument of coercion and repression, which assumes political, economic, and social cultural forms rather than physical armed forms. Relative to the oppressive nation, all institutions directly or indirectly controlled by the imperialist state are repressive, perform counter-revolutionary functions, and are no less forces to be engaged in combat by revolutionary cadres and masses than are the political police. I like how they use political police. It's great. Whoever's all here. C, the state repressive apparatus is also professional and is organized on a scientific basis with, as Sergei says, special attention to their character, education, training, recruitment, intelligence, service records, other knowledge, their knowledge of the programs, status, origins of methods of revolutionary parties, and the histories of leading members. 5. Hunters must be able to track and to know the habits and feeding grounds of their prey. Intelligent prey, on the other hand, must know how much as possible about the hunter, which includes knowing what the hunter knows about the prey. If the hunter is tracking the prey, then the prey must learn to avoid leaving traces and trails. If the hunter pursues the prey based on knowledge of the prey's habits and feeding patterns, then the prey must abandon those habits, avoid normal feeding areas, and maybe even change diets. The opposition wants to know whatever possible, whatever we allow them to know. They want to know who you know, where you go, when, how often, how long you stay, what you say and do while there. Nothing is really insignificant. They are on their job they are on their job even when they don't see or hear them. Contrary to what most of us seem to believe, and to avoid being caught off guard, coming up short, or having an improvise a quick lie or a quick getaway. We must be on our jobs even when we think we don't have to be. 6. Who's here? Making the need to know principle part of our very being should be understood to involve more than merely being vigilant with regard to clearly unidentifiable, invisible repressive forces, and those kind of situations and activity where the need is most obvious. The application of the need to know principle, basically that no one needs to know any information other than necessary to carry out their own activities, literally means that no one inside organized structures know more than necessary, and it means absolutely no one outside organized structures know anything at all. It often happens that we begin working with people who are later uncovered as planted agents of the state, or who turn traitors. In such situations, we find ourselves faced not only with the exposure of names, addresses, details of action, and other information that such persons acquire in the course of doing work that they were responsible for. We also usually find ourselves faced with the exposure of information that such people acquire from other who fail to practice need to know. 7. Making need to know part of our being means getting into the habit of never volunteering information. Example, a sister doing maintenance work at an office building is mopping the floor of one of the offices. An employee of the firm approaches the office, stops at the door upon seeing the wet floor, and asks, "Is that wax?" The sister says, "You can walk on it." Now, if you ask the sister, why didn't she say yes, it was wax, or no, it wasn't? Well, in the first place, she'll say, with the air of the worker, teacher instructing the cadre pupil, "I told him just what he needed to know. He seemed to need to know if he could walk on the floor, but then too he might have wanted to know if I was waxing it, which they say I'm to do 3 times a week, but I don't. So he left without finding out from me whether it was wax or not. And if tomorrow or next year I have to say what it was, I can say whatever I like or whatever I need to say. Yep, I make a habit out of telling them just what they need to know and no more. Something we can take up, everybody. Sergey, quote, "The immediate aim of the police is more to know than to repress. To know in order to repress at the appointed hour, to the extent desire, if not altogether. The state and its repressive forces won't flash new bulletins each time they acquire a piece of information about revolutionary mass forces. They won't publicize the name of those on today's surveillance sheet. You may make a mistake. In some cases, you'll be or become aware of it before it results in tragic consequences. But many times we make mistakes, but remain unaware of them until the door is kicked in. And sometimes even when we won't know exactly what led them to us. The enemy won't let us know when we've made mistakes and or when they discover them. Doing good. They assume that if we become aware of the mistakes, we'll repair any cracks or cover any trace and learn from the experience so that the error won't be repeated. The opposition assumes that if we learn that the agent has been exposed, or that the cadre has turned traitor, or that the comrade under torture had yielded information, the enemy assumes that in such situations we'll change whatever needs to be changed and abandon whatever needs to be abandoned. If comrades are arrested and released, the enemy assumes that we will impose a no contact policy, whereby contact with the comrade by others above and below are brought to the absolute minimum or stopped altogether. The enemy assumes that we know something about what we're doing, what we are doing, and that we taken them and ourselves seriously. They will get a piece of information and try to develop it to its deepest and widest limits before deciding upon, quote, an appointed hour. And that is not always a pre-dawn raid. It's sometimes a stop by a traffic cop who just happened to notice a busted taillight, or he may actually make the stop in ignorance, yet the grip of others. Branches sees the opportunity when our info is run through run through the computer. Sometimes the hour is seized when comrades carry out actions that run into obstacles. Under the cover of such mishaps, the enemy will move on names, faces, and addresses, etc., that they already had, but they'll pretend to have only discovered them as a result of failed actions. In this way, the enemy tries to keep us in the dark about the extent of the information they already have, and they try to protect the sources of their information. They will always try to keep us ignorant as to how well we've been doing ignorant to how well they've been doing their jobs to infiltrate, turning, tapping, following, picture snapping, questioning, checking, and cross-checking, indexing, and cross-indexing. Sometimes the appointed hour arrives, but they deliberately miss someone. They've thrown the net only so far when the making arrest, or they release someone, but they're still interested in knowing. They hope that those missed by the net and or those released after the arrest will become unconscious breeders and blind transformers by immediately becoming active again. In this way, we lead the state to more information on cadres they likely already knew about, and to names, faces, and address and methods that they didn't know about or didn't have the full scoop on. They will also hope that new contacts will be made by unconscious breeders and blind informers. They will hope that new resources will be tapped, new networks established, all exposed from the very beginning. They will hope that we won't perform what Lenin called, quote, the duty of the revolutionist to conceal from the eyes of the world the relationship of contacts with which he or she maintains, which he or she is establishing or trying to establish. Number 9, Sergei. Quote, faced by this wily adversary, powerful and cunning, a communist party lacking clandestine organization, a party which keeps nothing hidden, is like an unarmed person who, with no cover, in the sight of a well-positioned hunter. Revolutionary work is too serious to be kept in the glass house. The party must organize so as to avoid enemy vigilance as far as possible, so as to hide its most important resources, absolutely, so as to train our comrades in the behavior which is demanded by these imperatives. Clandestine organization should be understood in at least 2 ways. 1, the organization of the type of political and military structures usually considered underground. 2, the type of political, economic, and social culture activities which, while considered public or legal, is nevertheless revolutionary activity and should be conducted with an attitude and method characterized by the present reality of the war. We must understand it becomes a criminal act when cadres and activists continue to think and act as though they are protected by the U.S. Constitution, states and local statutes, and the myths and lies fed by the settlers and colonies of the empire about American democracy and other nonsense. So-called bourgeois legality and morality died when the Portuguese landed on Africa continent And when Columbus landed in the Indies, the most innocent / public or reformist activity is actually or potential revolutionary activities, and real revolution is illegal in America and too serious to be kept in the glass house. There is no such thing as, quote, legal anti-imperialist struggles or legal national liberation struggles. The opposition moves on the belief that there are, or that there will soon be, connections between public and clandestine anti-imperialist revolutionary activity. In this, their job to discover any such connections, and they take their job seriously. So they tap anti-imperialist phones, tape anti-imperialist speeches, and snap the pictures of those who deliver such speeches. They also follow public activists and otherwise keep close tabs on all their activity, no matter how legal. This is exactly what's meant by the party must organize so to avoid enemy vigilance as far as possible. Revolutionary cadres and revolutionary masses organize all forms of activity, political, economic, social culture, socio-cultural, among all classes, groups, and stratas. Enemy vigilance must be avoided as far as possible in all mass, public, and so-called legal work. 10. When it's said that the party must organize so as to hide its most important resources, absolutely. This isn't limited to financial and material resources, nor to the stashing of such resources behind locked secret doors. What are the most important resources? Our cadre supporters and sympathizers, networks, contacts, and relationships. The people are the most important resources. I'm sorry, I'm saying it loud because it's in big, bold letters. The vast majority of our resources are public. They work 9 to 5, live in housing projects, attend school, receive some form of welfare payments, some or not enough as yet, holds sensitive positions in the enemy state apparatus, its academic, media, business, and service institutions, and serve in its police and armed forces. Okay, we're good. Let's see what the next stopping point is. Hold on a second. Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay, 11. To say that the party must organize so as to train our comrades in the behavior which it's demanded by these imperatives means that training in the consciousness and methods of combating the political police is part of the organizing process, beginning at the stage of cadre, spotting and recruitment. All organized structures must fashion an apparatus which specialize in such training, using detailed and systematic methods. This apparatus must be responsible for ongoing studies, drawing lessons from our own experience and from the experience of others. It should also coordinate the periodic assessment of cadres structures from the standpoint of security, conducting the testing and testing the training and raising its levels in the daily activity supporters and sympathizers, primarily through the conduct of political education. We shouldn't take for granted that people will know the enemy and methods used to infiltrate, disrupt, and divert mass organizations. We must have a secure movement and struggle, not merely secure vanguard organization, collective and units. We need an impenetrable wall of mass consciousness, an entire revolutionary class that knows about the purpose and methods of state repression and how to defend against it and how to turn defense into offense. Welcome back. Hello. 12. Some of the things we do and some of the structures we build must be hidden clandestinely in the commonly understood meaning of the term. Other things we do and other structures built, contacts made, relationships established, etc., while taking place in public, View must be done in the more or less clandestine manner, so that ultimate purpose aren't undesirably noticeable, connections aren't exposed, and contacts aren't subtle or unobserved. Part 2. Good practice is the result of good practice. Okay, so this will be, I think I can do this one. All right. 1. There was once a collective of inspiring new Africans, revolutionaries engaged in study. And one day the subject was learning how to follow people and detect when you're being followed. One of the would-be revolutionaries saw no need for this type of study, got angry, and said that he was a revolutionary and not an espionage agent. Strangely, this study session took place in the late 1960s, several days after the Bloods had read an article which mentioned that the state was following such people as Stokely Carmichael and placing beepers on their cars. Other members of the collective tried to make the point that learning how to follow people and to be able to detect and elude similar surveillance upon oneself is an essential element in the training of all revolutionaries, whether they do public or clandestine work. Such training is part of the more practical side of the revolutionary science practiced by the professional revolutionaries. Number 2, reading the excerpt of party organization and convert actively shared their thoughts. Hey, Jacob. 2, Sergey has a chapter on simple advice to revolutionaries, and he points out that his suggestions aren't a complete code of the rules of clandestinity. It's clandestinity, INTY, or even a complete code of a precautions to be taken by revolutionaries. They contain no sensational recipe. They are simply basic rules. Strictly speaking, common sense should be enough to suggest them. But unfortunately, long experience teaches us that it is not out of place to spell them out. Carelessness on the part of revolutionaries has always been the best aid the police have. Number 3, Sergey's advice, sprinkled with a few bits of our comments. At the start, all surveillance is from the outside. This always involves following the individuals, getting to know their activities, movements, contacts, and then finding out their plans. Tailing sections are developed by all police forces. In the most serious cases, 2 agents spied on the same person, unbeknown to each other. Their reports were cross-checked and used to complement each other. These daily reports were sent to the police to be analyzed by specialists. These officers were dangerously perceptive. They would draw up tables showing a person's deeds and actions, the number of visits, their length, regularities, etc. Sometimes these tables brought out the importance of one member's relationship and his probable influence. Every revolutionary must regard themselves as being permanently followed. On the principle, the revolutionary should never neglect to take the necessary precautions to prevent being followed. The simplest rules are: 1, don't go directly to where you are going. 2, turn down a deserted street to check whether you are being followed. 3, when in doubt, turn back. 4, if you notice that you're being followed, jump on some kind of transport and then change. Again, we must stress the importance of consciousness. Security is not simply a matter of magical methods, especially when cadres will only learn even the simplest methods in the mechanical manner and and by route. Knowing the methods without having the theoretical perspectives that allow them to be used in the most appropriate manner is sometimes worse than not knowing the methods at all. Another thing to keep in mind is not a matter of being paranoid when it comes to employing such methods, nor is it a question of whether or not the opposition is actually following you. It is a matter of making a habit of being serious, applying science, being disciplined and vigilant. The enemy won't come up to you and say, "Watch yourself today. We're playing for real," and watching every move you make. More on what we mean. Hold on a second. Yeah. More on what we mean by stressing the importance of consciousness. It happens that we got a so-called vanguard force who still believe in or not think that the time is getting serious about security is after the state announced that civil liberties are being suspended or that martial law is being imposed. But by that time, it's too late to start employing security methods or to beginning developing a more developed consciousness. But the time such an announcement is made, assuming that it will be the lists of those to be arrested have already been compiled. So one aspect of what we mean by consciousness from the revolutionary perspective is that folks have lived in America all their lives and studied and been a part of the development of struggle against the state. But they still have the consciousness of bourgeoisie reformists, slaves, aventurists, and dilettantes. Ooh, I don't know this word. Dilettantes. They still have the consciousness and the petty bourgeoisie, even while claiming to wage revolutionary warfare. 4. Only got like a page and a half. 2 pages. Write down as little as possible. It's better not to write. Don't take notes on sensitive subjects. It's better sometimes to forget certain things than to take them down in writing. With that in mind, practice remembering addresses, names, etc. Where necessary, take notes which are intelligible only to yourself. Everyone can invent ways of abbreviating, interverting, transposing with correspondence. Take into account that your mail will be opened. Say as little as possible and try to make yourself understood only by the address. And the best way to do this is to prearrangement, i.e. during face-to-face discussions with the comrades, discuss and decide upon the methods to be used. Mention no third person unless absolutely necessary. And if this is to be done, it should be done according to prearranged methods, so that the third person should be mentioned only by code names known only to the addressee. Avoid all details about places, works, dates, and people. Learn to resort, even without prior arrangements, to what should always be very simple stratagems for trivializing information. Don't say, for example, that Conrad Yusuf has been arrested, but that Yusuf has suddenly fallen ill. And of course, Yusuf will not be the comrade's real or work name, but a code name used only between yourself and the address. Each comrade should have as many names as necessary, and these names should be known only to those with the need to know. In view of the fact that some correspondence between most comrades must take place, there must be face-to-face contact between such corresponding comrades so that the details of their exchanges can be arranged between them. It's also much better that each comrade have different systems for corresponding with each other, with each comrade, even than to have a single system for corresponding with each comrade. In the event of a state discovery and the system used with one comrade, they won't be able to use that knowledge immediately against other comrades. 5. Be aware of telephones. All telephones. Never say anything over the phone that you wouldn't say to a police officer. Don't make appointments over the phone except in prearranged code terms. And when using such codes, make them sound as normal as possible. That is, don't have them sound as if they are obviously codes or jagged parts of the conversations, etc. 6. Make it a principle that in illegal activity, which is to say in all activities, a revolutionary should know only what is useful or necessary to know, and that it is often dangerous to know or tell more. The less that is known, the greater the security. Be on guard against the inclinations to give away confidence. Know how to keep quiet. Keeping quiet is a duty to the party and to the struggle. Know how to forget of your own accord what you should not know. It is a mistake which may have serious consequences to tell your closest friend, mate, or most trusty comrade a party secret which is not indispensable for them to know. Sometimes you may be doing them wrong because you are responsible for what you know, and it may be a heavy responsibility. Don't take offense or get annoyed at another comrade's silence. This isn't a sign of lack of confidence, but rather a fraternal esteem of what should be mutual consciousness and revolutionary duties. 7. In the event of arrest, at all costs, keep cool. Don't let yourself be intimidated or provoked. Don't reply to any questions without having a lawyer present and without previously consulting with your lawyer. If possible, the lawyer should be a comrade, or at least someone who has a significant level of political consciousness. If it's not possible to have a lawyer, don't say anything without really thinking about it. As a matter of principle, say nothing. Trying to explain yourself is dangerous. You are in the hands of professionals who are able to get something out of your every word. Any explanation gives them vulnerable documentation. Lying is extremely dangerous. It is difficult to construct a story without its defects being too obvious. It is almost impossible to improvise. Don't try to be more clever than them. The relationship of forces is too unequal for that. Never confess. When you deny something, deny it firmly. The enemy is capable of anything. Don't let yourself be surprised or disconcerted by the classics. We know everything. This is never the case. It is a barefaced trick. Don't be intimidated by the internal threat. You'll pay for this. What you'll pay for is a confession or a clumsy explanation or falling for tricks and moments of panic. But whatever the situation of the accused, a hermetically sealed defense built up out of much silence, a few definite affirmation or denials can only help. Don't believe a word. Another classic ploy. We know everything because your comrade so-and-so has talked. Don't believe a word of it, even if they try to prove it. With a few careful select clues, the enemy is capable of finding in profound knowledge of things. Even if so-and-so did tell all, this is a further reason to be duly circumspect. Again, say nothing, sign nothing. 8, before the police, of course, don't try to establish the truth. There is no truth in common between the oppressed and the oppressor. Their truth is not ours. Before the judges of the oppressors, the comrade does not have to account for any act. The comrade can turn the courtroom into a school, or the comrade can keep silent. 9, a supreme warning. Be on your guard against conspiracy mania, against posing, adopting errors of mystery, dramatizing simple events, or conspiratorial attitudes. The greatest virtue of a revolutionary is simplicity and scorn for all poses, including revolutionaries and especially counter-conspiratorial poses. Rebuild. All right, and we'll stop there, and we'll read where it says, you must read this first. So we're stopping on page 137 of the book. And then tomorrow we should get into the meats and potatoes of things, the meditations of Frantz Fanon, it looks like. We'll see what happens tomorrow. But that was pretty sound advice. This is something that you should learn, even if you're part of cadres or if you're part of organizations and groups. You know what I mean? So these are things to like reread and to maybe put into your own things. You know what I mean? Does anybody have any questions before I close it out? So I have none of my friends up here because they dealing stuff. One's on vacation, one's dealing with their parents. Anybody have any questions? No. All right. No questions from Doodley so far. Anybody else? All right, understandable. Okay then. Since we don't have anybody else, I'm going to go ahead and close it out, and we'll start tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll have my peeps up here. At least Doodley. I don't think I'll get Joe back until after Saturday. So, we'll see how that goes on Sunday. All right, everybody. I wish you a good night.